Okay, now that we have seen the differences between trying to help take care of your land and taking your pasture to the next level and trying to help your pocketbook out and not make so much hay and all that labor intensive time that goes into making hay and repairing your equipment and working on it and just maintaining it in general. Right here I'm wanting to get a little more in depth with what we've done with our trial so far. Right here I want you to look at this is a blend that Lee Holcomb has come up with. This has got winter peas and clover. Right here's some clover. Right here's a winter pea. What this is doing is producing nitrogen from the air, or absorbing nitrogen from the air and putting it into nodes. And what I want you to see here, it's hard to see with the sun hitting us up against us, but this particular spot where we've put this blend is a lot more lush and green. And what's happening here is these legumes are making nitrogen, pulling nitrogen out of the air for us and giving it back to some of these oats and triticale that we've got growing here. But what I want to show here is what legumes can do for you. A few steps above here, we start getting back into another test. That's just barley, just straight barley. Look at the yellowing differences between some of this, some of that. There's not a whole lot of difference right now. This is still early on in the winter grazing season, but you can already tell that this stuff has a lot more yellowing in the leaves. And this is what has really opened my eyes to how legumes can really help your soil and the crop that you're trying to grow. And the whole thing that I ask that you understand is to take into consideration, you've got to be patient. You've got to be patient. Your soil is not a night and day change. It takes time. Just in the last, since September, I've seen a huge difference in this pasture. But if we keep doing this, what are we going to see 5 years from now? What's our end results going to be in 5 years after this trial? Right here's some of the blend. Right there's some of the barley. Legumes in your mix? No legumes. Yes, we've got chicken litter here. That's got a surplus of nitrogen in it. But look at the difference. That's what I want to emphasize. Not only whenever this crop dies and is terminated or incorporated or whatever you want to do with it, we're going to have little holes in the soil. So whenever it rains, our water holding capacity is going to be much greater than the soil where I showed you earlier, where it's just bare pasture, because that ground is compact. By rotating these cows in and out of this, we get to pick and choose when and when we're not going to let these cows come in here. So if it's really, really wet, we don't want the cows to be in here. We want them to be back on their common ground, or where they're feeding hay, or where they're eating hay at. So they're not out here packing our main part of our pasture that's being the most productive. And I'll have to thank Chris Loudermilk for this. But if it wasn't for him, I don't know that I would have went full-fledged and done something like this. He talked to me about the fences and how to set it up, and there's ways to work around water. So you just got to take time and think about it. We're not fortunate enough to be able to have a pinwheel situation where we've got the water in the center of the pasture. We're limited to that, but we're getting there. So make an alleyway, find ways around it. This fence that we're putting up, it doesn't cost that much to do. Granted, you need a good perimeter. You can fence, you can take steps back and do a cheaper route whenever you're sectioning it off. But this is the barley that we're in right now, and you can obviously tell where there's been a cow pie or whatever, urinate, whatever might have happened right there in some of these clumps. And now we're working our way up to a spot that's already been grazed. This has been grazed once. And right here you can somewhat tell the difference between the soil here. Not the soil, but the actual forage itself, where it's been grazed once versus not being grazed. We've got lush barley here. Probably foot tall. But this is my case for sustainability.